Well, here we are then. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. And after a couple of weeks, now that the dust has settled, it's finally time to look at the next race weekend, the final one before the summer break. And it feels a bit sad to say that one, but it is what it is. And so, here's what to expect on this episode today. Firstly, we discuss, is this a chance for a Hamil-Ton as Hamilton approaches a ton of Grand Prix victories? Or does Red Bull and Max Verstappen finally get vengeance here at Hungary? Next, we discuss why the Hungaroring is just the right circuit at the right time, coming up in the Formula 1 calendar. Finally, more on this battle by discussing room for any shenanigans this weekend. And also, we have to discuss more about the midfield and more specifically, well, which prancing horse is going to turn up here today, this weekend. So that's all that's to expect for this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. Let's dive right into it. Well, hello there, folks. Welcome along. My name is Soumil Arora. You might know me from The Driving Force on Disney Plus Hotstar or the MX Player, because that's where the contract has expired now, and that's why the whole show is on MX Player. But you get the idea. That's The Driving Force for me. I'm joined by Kunal Shah, the former marketing head of the Force India Formula 1 team, now the motorsport consultant for the VS Sport Network in Norway. And I'm going to start off by making probably the pun that all of us will make this weekend. I'm saying that I'm very hungry for more racing action this time, Kunal, and we certainly are going to get a lot of that this time out.
Oh, we're going to get a lot of that. Thank you for the introduction, Soumil. I think I'm going to add a few more buzzwords that we will definitely hear this weekend, right?
Go for it.
Monaco without the walls. That's
Yes.
one thing I've been hearing ever since. It's been 36 years since the Hungarian Grand Prix or thereabouts, and it's been on every single time. I think the other one that comes across, and most drivers have said this in their press conferences, is it's like a big go-kart, a large go-kart circuit, right? So it's that. And for once, Soumil, I know it's the last race before the summer break, but for once, I'm actually not upset about the fact that we're going to have a summer break and then the second half. And you know why? I have to tell you why, right? For the first time since I can ever remember, maybe for the first time in history, and this is where Sundaram comes in, as always, right? We have more races on the calendar post the summer break. So the second half of the 2021 Formula 1 season actually has more races than the first half, if we have 23 races on the calendar. Simple maths. This is the 11th round of the season, so which means after the summer break, we will have 12 rounds.
I thought I was already struggling to cover up everything in these last 11 weeks, and there's going to be more of that. Just crazy. And if you're wondering why do we say if there are only 23 rounds, shameless plug back to the old episode that we did. What if F1 has less races and why they may have less races? So check that episode right there. But yes, Kunal, we have got probably one of the most emotionally satisfying battles on the field right now. It's on the plate right now. Verstappen versus Hamilton. Quite frankly, this is just going to be a blockbuster this time out.
It's going to be a blockbuster. But before we go to Verstappen and Hamilton, right, I have to ask you a question, and hence to everyone listening in as well. And, you know, guys, by the time you're listening, we are closer to the Grand Prix on Sunday, right? But this is a regular format of a Grand Prix weekend that we are back to. Friday practice, Saturday qualifying, Sunday race. It's the first time after an F1 sprint that we actually don't have that meaningful a Friday.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know about you, or before I ask you what you feel, Soumil, I suddenly wish we just had more excitement on Friday than just the FP sessions, you know. And I will, of course, follow Formula 3 and Dennis Hauger and the likes, but I wouldn't have, you know, I would love for a more meaningful Friday. What do you think?
That's a good point. That's a very good point, to be honest. But that's the marketing strategy of any good company. For instance, case in point, Jio in India. Get you habituated to it, get you used to it, and then even though you may not be the biggest fan, you just can't live without it, right? So maybe that's how they're going to sell sprint qualifying to us. It's just fun, and you're absolutely right. Fridays feel a bit more hollow. There's not that sense of occasion this time. There is for Sunday, mind you, but not for Friday. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so I know it's not going to be every Grand Prix that we'll have a sprint weekend or whatever they call it. But yeah, I mean, you know, I would have loved qualifying tomorrow. I mean, and then of course I'm being greedy. I just want action all the time, right? F1 track action.
Exactly, that's the case for all of us. And let's dive right down into the first piece of action, the first biggest piece of storytelling that's going to happen this weekend. And we have to discuss, well, is this going to be a Hamil-Ton, or does Red Bull and Max Verstappen finally get vengeance? Now, the blood hasn't dried up, Kunal. I know that's a very crude way of putting it, but Verstappen and Red Bull are still very emotive about this battle. They're still very much on their heels. And yes, the dust might have settled in the fan communities. And finally, it helps to have a week-long break between Silverstone and Hungary, which has let some of the opinions calm down. It's let some of the waves die down a little bit. But inside both of the camps, I think the animosity is right there. And I think it will be the first race since the animosity levels have just been turned up to 11, and this could mean some madness in terms of racing action.
I can tell you, I sat through the press conferences today, and you could sense that Max was itching to get on track and let his driving do the talking. Of course, he was very measured in what he said on in his press conference, and then what Lewis Hamilton said, and Max was constantly pointing out, I went out, I had a hard hit, not my fault, it was somebody else's fault. And Lewis said, I called Max, we sorted it out. So I think they're just warming up for what's going to come for the weekend. Put it this way, it's actually fantastic that the Max and Lewis battle is going to resume at the Hungaroring. It's a nasty circuit, right? You cannot overtake as easily, right? There is one DRS zone. There is complete emphasis on on track position. So the battle will start all the way from qualifying, and we've seen how close it is between the two in qualifying. And then we'll have the opening lap again, because the driver who probably gets in front might just stay in front, especially if it's Max Verstappen. So it's brewing up to be an epic weekend already for me, Soumil. And since I'm talking about the circuit, again, Hungary has shown before, you could do a 1 or a 2 stopper. Both options are viable. Yep. And the pit lane time loss is just about 22 seconds, right? So it's everything is dialing in for giving us the climax on Sunday, and I really hope it's a climax and not an anti-climax.
It could well be. That's just the case of how the last few odd seasons have been, but I think otherwise. And let's speak about the occasion for a moment, Kunal. Last year, of course, we will discuss more on this point in the next part, but what I mean to say is last year, Mercedes were flying right here, right? And Hamilton, I think, had a few less wins right now. Mercedes, they have lost the edge since then, but at Hungaroring, we definitely saw and said, right, these guys are outstanding. Remember those qualifying onboard laps that we saw? The way they were just darting it on each of those corners. It's just sublime, but they no longer have the edge, and there's a real chance that Verstappen could end up postponing Hamilton's crowning moment, his 100th Grand Prix win, by a few more races. Who do you reckon actually has the edge over here?
We all know, at least in the general sense that I get, and I'm sure everyone gets, that Red Bull is the quicker car. Max is able to do things in the Red Bull which no other driver has. But similarly, if the gap is as close as it was in Silverstone, it is the Hamilton factor that's allowing Mercedes to sort of get their nose in a fair bit. And then we see what happens, when the nose gets in a fair bit, there can be so many skirmishes, right? So to me, I think it, yes, it's a Mercedes favored circuit. It's a Hamilton favored circuit. He could go for a record 9th win at the Hungaroring this weekend, right? But I would say that while the momentum is probably with them with the whole incident and so on, Max, Red Bull bouncing back with a vengeance, out to prove again that they have the faster package and they are the faster team. And then, of course, something else that we will hear this weekend is which driver will take the psychological advantage going into the summer break. And that's another thing, through the weekend as well.
That's just one of the aspects. But coming back to Max, right? this past weekend, he was so intent on just getting back into the car. Firstly, he said that he felt like he'd done a couple of rounds of boxing with Tyson Fury. That's how dazed he was a week after the accident. And that says a lot. But Verstappen was back in the car, mind you. Ended up competing in the iRacing Spa 24 hours. And he did long stints. He competed for around 8-9 hours in that race. He was that intent on getting back. Even though he was not 100%, he was that focused and he just wanted more track time. And it's not the most representative track time, and definitely, but you can see the intent, you can see the focus right here. But Kunal, for a second, I know there's a good chance that it might not happen this weekend, but we have to speak about it. 100 Grand Prix wins for Lewis Hamilton. How big of an occasion could that be? That's, by the way, that's 9 more than Michael Schumacher. Not that it has to be said because everyone knows that, but it just baffles me to sit for a moment and think that Lewis Hamilton could very well have 100 Grand Prix wins at the end of this weekend.
That's 9 more wins. That's 10% more wins than Michael Schumacher. And Soumil, again, I'm going to shamelessly plug a previous episode we did, and it was just an open question. How many wins do you think Lewis Hamilton will have by the time he retires from Formula One? And I remember, if my calculation was still right then, it was of course an assumption. I think it's going to be about 112, 115, 120. Who knows? If this is not his last contract extension with Mercedes, which Toto Wolff says it isn't. So it's going to be epic. It's going to be legendary in every way. And, it's, again, I don't think it's, I'll put it this way. With the direction that Formula One is wanting to go in, where they want to have rules where teams don't end up dominating as much as, say, Mercedes have, right? Then I don't know if drivers will even get close enough to 100 Grand Prix wins, even if there are 25 races that happen in the season, right? But again, this is Formula One. Anything can happen, and anything or everything does, right? And since you mentioned Max's preparation, right? I'm sure you would have loved to know that he actually, had a 24-hour sim race planned, and he did that given your love for esports, Soumil. And today in the press conference, he actually revealed that he drove 8.5 hours of that 24 hours of that sim race, and he said it helped him get back into focusing and concentration and likes. And it's incredible just what every driver does to get back into shape, especially after the beating he had last weekend.
And when we were on the call for that, every single minute we got a comment, where is Max? We want to see Max. How is Max doing? Where is Max's team? How good is Max? Is he better than Lewis Hamilton? Is Hamilton racing in this race? There's just a sense of excitement and buzz around Max Verstappen this year that you can't quite match up. And it's outstanding to see the feelings right then. And when Max came on track, when we were in the broadcast booth, I was just like, yeah, come on. It's the Max show right now, even though there were some other fun battles right now. We couldn't focus anywhere else. He was good that weekend, but I can only wonder what is he going to be like for Red Bull this time out. But one point that I have to bring out, Kunal, one very interesting topic is that we are coming at a circuit that, well, many people may not like on the sim, or many people may not like to drive on, but it genuinely is just the right circuit at the right time for this championship battle. Now, allow me to explain why. Take yourself back a couple of years. Hungary 2019. Red Bull Racing were clearly not the fastest car, but they still were good enough to put out quite a battle up against Mercedes. And Mercedes outsmarted them, outtricked them in what has become a legendary race in the world of Formula One since then. But even after that, Hamilton has literally been one of the best drivers at the Hungaroring ever. And Verstappen has shown signs of trouble over the last few years. Remember contact with Alex Albon 2019, crashed on the way to the grid in 2020. But finally, the edge seems to be with the car. And Hamilton, well, at his quote-unquote home circuit in a way, he's got the slower car finally. Finally, he's the one chasing at the Hungaroring. It just matches up so well.
It does. And, to me, just the fact that it's the two of them battling time and again is so great. But let's remember, Monaco without the walls actually also means that Ferrari might just be in contention. Guys, remember who was on pole or almost on pole, or not almost, who actually had pole and crashed in the dying minutes of the qualifying session in Monaco? It was Charles Leclerc. And luckily for Charles, if he gets pole this weekend, the walls are a little further away from the actual racing circuit, Soumil. But before we get to Ferrari, right? I know you're being very humble about it, and you're not being very direct about it, but you should let our listeners know that in that 24-hour race that Max Verstappen is actually talking about, you were one of the commentators. You actually were commentating in that race. How was that experience?
It's come to a stage where I can thankfully say I've done that before. Nah, just kidding. I have done that before, but it's a certain different charm. It doesn't feel any different to any other esports race that you commentate on. And by the way, they are mighty intense. You should check out RaceSpot TV, by the way. But what I mean to say is when Max comes on, there's an air of excitement. When you see any other real-world driver come on, there's nothing like that. We've seen GT drivers come out. We've seen Formula 2 drivers race sometimes. Never, ever for Max. Nothing like when Max is around. It's just a different charm. And I shouldn't be astounded still, but every time he comes up on a RaceSpot TV broadcast, the chat fills up, our views go up by tenfold. It's the Verstappen effect, and the Verstappen effect will be prevalent on the track as well, because we're all so intrigued to discuss, well, how is he going to be like this weekend?
Yes, and this weekend, Soumil, he's of course going to have multiple things. We spoke about the media that he was there. While we are recording this, and we actually waited a few hours while recording, given the whole request to review that Red Bull Racing has put forward to the FIA stewards, right? So multiple fronts on which they are attacking, Mercedes and Hamilton. We've spoken about, the FIA being used and the teams lobbying the FIA to help them in their, title battle. And here's Red Bull Racing trying to do something similar. And I really hope that Red Bull has more evidence than just a Karun Chandok video from Sky Sports.
There's that. There certainly is that. And that's going to be a major story. But there are other major stories coming up right here. Stay where you are. Stay on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. Back in a couple of seconds.